What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode with Between Two Slopes. Trent and I are here to give you the goods on snowboards today.
We're super excited. And we're not as fit with snowboards as we are with skis, but I dare say that we know a thing or two.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you kind of have to know stuff about boards in order to sell them,
Right,
in
absolutely.
the shops. I mean, some people will pay money for anything.
Also true. Here's the thing. If it looks cool, put it on my feet,
Yeah, for sure. But I'm actually excited for this. I mean, I've been snowboarding a handful of times. I wish I could say I've gone more and been more aggressive. I feel like it's been a fairly natural experience, and I mean, snowboard usually. I stick to like blue routes. I don't usually don't do anything crazy. Mostly, I like to save those for my ski days. You know what I
Right.
mean? But from just going and boarding and skiing with many of my friends, being involved heavily in the industry, I would say we have some good info to put out there to help with boarders.
Totally.
Really, those two that might be looking to get into snowboarding or just like needing a slight upgrade in their gear probably won't have too much for the pro level guys.
Yeah.
Or anything.
We can answer like some questions, if you're getting into more specific boards or
The
performance
technicals on
boots.
yeah.
We can answer some stuff
Absolutely.
like that, but
Yeah.
there's some deep stuff that we know more about skis.
Yeah.
So hopefully everything's sounding good. Does that look straight to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Oh yeah. I can correct our camera a little bit here.
Yeah.
Give you guys a better view. There we go.
Ooh, bingo.
Right?
That's great. Okay. So let's start with boots. We'll just work our way down, right? We'll go boots, bindings, boards.
Yeah, because we had two videos, one about boots and one about bindings, and I feel like we really stuck to skis.
Yeah.
We even mentioned at the end of our last video that we would hop in and do more depth on snowboard technology.
Yes.
Right? Boots are fun. I mean, boots are like my favorite topic in general. Okay.
Boots are great.
Right? A big part of it is because boots will really make or break your day on the mountain.
Totally.
Right? When it comes to snowboard boots, you have a lot more flexibility, I would say, right? Ski boots are such a particular point because they can cause a lot of pain on the foot, and they're a little bit harder to size, right? Snowboard boots, a lot more true to size. So I'll start there. We'll start with a little bit of sizing and general ideas about snowboard boots for everyone, right? One of the things about snowboard boots is they come in your general size of same as shoes, especially for US lengths. And I mean, I think it's across the board. If you're in Europe, it's the same. So you can go ahead, like for me, I wear a size 10. I can go ahead and grab a size 10 snowboard boot, knowing it's going to fit nice and comfortably. If I want a little more performance, you may consider sizing down because the general rule of boot fitting still applies, right? When you want to go do an active sport like skiing and snowboarding and you're going downhill, the last thing you want is to have motion sliding forward and back.
Right. Yeah, I would argue. So I like my normal shoes a little big, but my ski boots are pretty snug. And that's the same. Like I probably wouldn't get my true size in a snowboard boot or like my normal size in a snowboard boot. I'd probably size down a half size to a full size.
Right.
Just to make sure there's no play. And then I'm getting the performance that I would want, right?
Right.
So
get it nice and snug, nice and fit to it. What's funny is after skiing and snowboarding and rock climbing, I've started buying my shoes smaller than I did in the past.
Yeah.
And I always wore like a 10, and then I sized up and I was like, 10 and a half, give me a little room. Maybe 11s here and there, and now I'm like going back down the scale and I'm back to 10s.
Yeah.
I just like it. I like having a shoe now that fits like snug-ish,
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. But
so once you get your size down and you have that good fit, really one thing I want to touch on is like this boot in particular, we've got laces.
Yeah.
If you want to hold that up a little higher so you can see. This boot has laces. And one thing I'll say is I really like when people buy or work with lace boots. They're easier to maintain, right? If you have a lace rip, it's way easier to fix than a boa. You can tighten and adjust them way more specifically than usually a boa can, or like a speed lace. So I really like the lace up. They aren't as convenient, but they do give you some really cool features.
Right. It's very different from a ski boot where everything is buckle. I
Right.
can tell recently where they started bringing BOA into ski boots. For those of you that aren't aware of what a BOA system is, we'll hit it real quick. Simply enough, it's a dial-up system. It basically just uses a dial on the front of the boot that you get to twist, and that twisting motion will tighten the laces. Basically, on both, it'll pull from both sides, right?
Yeah.
So very simple, really easy to use, which I love, right? When it comes to snowboard boots, you have 3 options typically. When it comes to like if you're going to lace up, if you're going to use a BOA system, or if you're going to use one of Burton's speed lace systems.
Yep.
Right, they're kind of going out. You'll see them more in older gear.
Very rare.
Yeah, but you do still find them in the shops, you know.
Totally.
And they're really nice and easy to use. They really actually aren't a bad system. What they do is they give you one lace, so you get laces on both sides that are attached to a pull cord, and pulling the right side tightens the top part of the boot, and pulling the left side tightens the bottom half of the boot. That's on top of the toe there.
And
right?
And one thing I didn't love about them is then you have like all this extra cord, and you can like tuck them in the boot, but it's just a hassle.
They were like so much better as far as like being able to tighten your boots than laces for quickness.
Yeah.
For about a year until BOA came out the next year.
Yeah, and then people were like, "I'm over this."
Yeah. So, but they are prevalent. You know, they're not bad to use. I will say, so we can give you guys some info on boots here for snowboard boots too. You'll find different preferences mainly on which to buy. There isn't one that's better than the other per se. You can get BOA systems that will do the top and the bottom half separately.
Yeah, that's what I was going to touch on. There's dual BOA systems, right? So you could be getting, sometimes there's one on the side right here and then one on the front. And they are really tightening and adjusting different parts of the boot to give you the specific fit that you want. But they are really great. Some people prefer double BOA more than anything.
I would say most people do. I mean, if you're looking for performance and you're not going with your standard laces, that's the way to go.
Yeah.
You know, K2 has an awesome boot, one of my favorites, called the Masis, which actually has an internal frame structure that is attached to a BOA. So that way you're tightening this internal frame to pull your foot backwards in the boot. And I mean, that's innovative technology. That's such awesome. It's been around for a little bit now.
Right.
But like, you had not seen anything like that or resembling that in a snowboard boot for a while. So
yeah, really cool. But just like a ski boot, they also have a liner, right?
Yeah, totally. And most liners on a snowboard boot, this one's a little beat up, but I'll rip it out here so you can see. Nice thing about snowboard boots is they're generally a little easier. Oh, this one's got Velcro in it.
The trick is to not say it's easier until you have it out.
I know. Well, it has Velcro, so but they do come out a lot easier even that.
They go in easier too.
Right. So you do have a lace-up system on the interior liner as well, which is nice to help snug that foot.
Which is very uncommon with ski boots, right? You don't really have a liner adjustment in your ski boots. So it's really cool to be able to see, a liner adjustment in your snowboard boot. And once again, like these are going to fit and feel a lot like a regular shoe, and they're going to allow you to move your ankle like a regular shoe.
Right.
Whereas a ski boot, you can't.
Yeah. So I want to hit on something. So we're talking a little bit about hit sizing, talking a little bit about lace-up technology with snowboard boots. We'll talk here briefly about stiffness as well and fit. But as we're kind of moving into fit of a boot, I want to point this out real quick. Yeah. So this is the same for snowboard boots, for ski boots, for most of your shoes, right? Boots all come with an interior footbed, right? Or insole, whichever you prefer to call it, which you can pull these out. Oh, interesting. This one's it must have been orthopedic.
Yeah.
We have a little half one in here, but most of these footbeds have one right here, actually, that we showed you in our ski video, I guess it was really our boot video.
Right.
We talked about
a couple times ago.
Yeah. Most of them come pretty barren. They're very, very flimsy. The top of this, I mean, you can just flex it back and forth. Surprisingly, this one from Solomon, they actually have a little bit of support underneath. However, you can see arch is just minimal.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
nothing to
it more like it looks like an arch than there actually is anything on the top here. You know, to make you think you're getting an arch in your foot,
right?
But, for your footbed, but you're not. So I always recommend upgrading these suckers. Pull them out, throw them out.
Yeah,
get yourself a better pair, right? It will make your day so much better. I do it in my shoes. I mean, I do it in all my active gear. It's something that the industry doesn't want to spend money on, so they just assume you will upgrade it.
Yeah,
you know. So,
wanted to hit on that out. I have that out here. Yeah.
Also, another hot tip for you, because this is kind of fun now that I have the liner out of this boot. I want to tell you guys a little bit about the way boots should fit. We've talked about them being snug around the foot. It should fit like a glove on your foot. Right. However, we haven't talked a whole ton about like some of the fitting processes and how to make it better. So what you can do if you're having issues with your snowboard boots or your ski boots, this works the same. You can use a little bit of foam, just a light foam material, which I have like some right here.
Here, I can hold this.
Yeah, can show you guys this right here. You can buy some that have, or just use, this is, what's the name of it? I can't remember the name of it. It's like what's that? Neoprene. Yes, thank you. It's just a neoprene foam. I could buy like a huge roll on Amazon for like $15. And I use it for all sorts of different purposes, weatherproofing and making things more comfortable in my car and whatnot. But you can buy this, use double-sided tape, or look for one that has a stick back to it. And what you can do is use it on your boot to better the fit of your snowboard boot. And what we actually do, this is what professional ski boot fitters do in the shops. I mean, I did it many, many times, especially a very common area is around the ankle. So when you're wearing this, it's nice to have somebody help you. So you have a second person to look at it so you can have your foot in the liner itself, but pull the liner out of the boot, put your foot in, and identify where your ankle is, right? And if you're getting movement when you're snowboarding and you feel a little bit of movement in that ankle of the boot, you can add a little bit of this foam, just cut it out into like a boomerang, right? Some people call it an L shape, whatever. You don't need that much, and just put it there right around the back of the ankle, okay? I would do it on both sides. Once that's done and it's stuck to the boot, go ahead and be careful and put it back into your shell and step in and try it out. You will notice a huge difference in that pocket. It feels so much better.
Yeah.
So,
and one thing I want to clarify too here is when you're working with boots, remember that millimeters are miles, right?
Yes.
So when he said like use a little, like, yeah, use just a little. You don't need like to double layer anything because a little goes a long way.
I would get a very thin pack of the neoprene. I think this one was, I want to say like 3/8 of it, or no, it's like a little less than a 1/4 inch, I think.
Yeah.
So you don't need much. Get the thinnest one you can and start there because you can always build it up.
Yep.
Right. So.
Okay, sweet. Anything else you want to talk about with?
No, I mean, we could get into some future, if you're interested in knowing future, like having a future video on alterations, leave a comment, because there's a lot you can do if you have like, what do we call it? A bunion, or some people call them like the fifth toe or sixth toe.
Yeah.
Sorry. Hopefully you have a fifth toe.
Yeah.
If
Not everybody though.
Right. If you have like the sixth toe issue on the outside of the foot there, you can do a similar process with the foam, or we can talk a little bit about heating the liners up and packing them out a little bit more. Same with plantar fasciitis. There's some little tricks we can talk about there. It gets a little more specific when you're dealing with the interior side of the foot.
Yeah.
So let us know if you guys want to learn about that. And for snowboard boots or ski boots, I mean, it's kind of scary to say, but I mean, I've heated up ski boots with a heat gun and used Dremels to cut them out and alter them on customers' $600 boots. So, you know, it's something that is done and we can show you a little bit about. I usually recommend, if you're getting to the extreme point though, to have a professional look at it.
Yep.
So just to be safe. Yep. But you know, if you're handy and you want to give it a shot, practice on your siblings' boots first.
Exactly. Absolutely. Great idea.
Right. Awesome.
So I'm actually going to move. What's up, Noah?
What's up?
Let's actually move over to, into the bindings. But before we leave boots, I want to talk about step-on boots, right? This will kind of bridge us into bindings.
A little bit about stiffness, if you would.
Yes. Let's talk stiffness. When it comes, every brand is a little different when it comes to stiffness with snowboard boots. They'll have usually with a lower price point, you're getting a lower stiffness. And then if you have a double boa, usually that is going to provide more stiffness. And just like a ski boot, the stiffer the boot is, the more responsive it's going to be. But sometimes the more work you're going to have to put into each turn, right?
Yeah. I find in comparison to, which is funny because I'm getting this way for ski boots now, is that I want a slightly less stiff boot so that I can activate it better and I can lean into it
and you don't have to work as
get
hard.
The performance, not have to work as hard, especially in cold temps when everything tightens up and gets a little bit stiffer, right? With snowboard boots, though, in particular, I know a lot of people go a lot off of preference. There is more performance in a stiffer boot to react quicker. However, the flexibility isn't always a bad thing, and a lot of your performance is in the binding. So getting something comfortable is always the best thing to go off first.
Totally.
So,
awesome. We got some more people. Elijah, Miles.
What's up, guys?
What's up?
Glad to have you.
Welcome.
Thank you for
Let
joining.
us know if you have any questions.
Yeah, for sure.
So step-ons, right? Boots are going to be very similar. They've got step-on boots in double boa as well as single boa, if I'm not mistaken. And then the binding is something that's more like a ski binding where you can simply step into it. And it kind of will have a click and then you're good. This technology, it was really popular in the early 2010s. Then it kind of died out and then the technology improved and it's becoming really popular again. People used to have a problem with snow getting jammed and different things like that, but those problems have since been addressed by the manufacturer and they've really improved, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. We do have a comment here, and I'm wondering, Trent, if we want to address this now or wait till we get closer to boards from Miles. You can go ahead and read this off.
Yeah. Can you tell me about front side carves and how to not fall on your hands? I'm having trouble on my toe edge. That's a great question.
Yeah.
Right? Really, I'd say what it is, and you can speak to this a little more.
Yeah.
But what it is it's as you're going in for your carve, if you aren't, so if here's your board, right? And you're flat and you go in for your toe edge and you're allowing it to carve. If you're too much like this, that's what's going to allow your toe edge to catch and slap, right?
Yeah.
And so really you want to make sure that when you're carving, you're keeping your board downhill, right? You don't want to get parallel with it at all on your toe edge because that's what's going to make it catch. It's hard because you get used to doing that with your heel edge because that's how you stop, right? But you do that on your toe edge, you're going to end up on your hands.
Yeah. So first of all, Miles, to help speak to this, this is for anyone learning snowboarding, probably one of the harder parts of learning the sport is the toe edge. So don't feel bad about falling on your hands. Everybody does it. This is how it goes, right?
Welcome.
Right. Yes. You are exactly right. If you are on your toe edge and you're falling on your hands, meaning you're falling uphill and you're bracing there, what's happening is that your board is too much tilted that you're catching the edge and that's forcing you to fall forward, right? Versus if it wasn't tilt, if it was more flat towards the bottom of the hill, you'd risk getting closer to running flat or hitting your heel edge and falling the other way, right? What I definitely recommend doing if you started boarding, you probably heard of the falling leaf exercise, right? Falling leaf. When you see a leaf fall, and we talk about it in school and whatnot, is like the leaf sways from side to side. And this is how they teach you to get down the mountain on a heel edge first, is to go one way, come back on the other direction, right? So you're doing goofy and regular, and you do that the entire way down the mountain. You can do the same thing on your toe edge and practice going falling leaf just on the toe edge all the way down. And you'll really start to get a feel for that toe edge, and then let yourself get a little bit of speed, right?
Yeah.
And then once you start getting that feel for it, do the same exercise, but switch and alternate. So then that's when you start going, okay, I'm a regular rider. So if I'm going to my right, I'm going to go toe edge. And then right as I get to the end of that turn, I'm going to switch back to heel and switch forward, and then get used to that switching. And that trick right there is really what gets that confidence up. So you're like, oh, okay, I've got this. That little transition from heel toe, right? It's kind of like driving. I always say it's like driving stick shift in a car, because a lot of people think you got to go both feet. It's not at all like that. Usually your back foot has majority of the control, right?
It's like riding a ripstick.
Yeah. So when you're going toe edge, you're going to actually have a little bit of pressure on the front foot and the ball of the foot, and then you're really going to pull up on the heel on that back, because that front foot's giving you the direction you're going.
Yeah. So Miles then says, how do you slow down if you're keeping your board straight? Going fast is so scary. So, I mean, you're spot on. Don't fall. Just like Austin was saying, if you're going straight down, your back foot's controlling. That's what's going to give you the swivel. You swivel out harder, and that's what's going to slow you down and create those turns. The more turns you do, the slower you're going to go.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to slow you down. That's what your brakes are.
Yeah.
So
going fast is scary. I love it.
The best.
You know, I've got 2 nephews learning snowboarding right now, and the only way they know how to go is straight.
Yeah,
you know,
that's the only way you need
fast.
to go. Yeah,
Right?
That's awesome.
But exactly, you know, if it is a fear, or if you're just joking around too, I mean, it is scary. But start with the falling leaf exercise. That will really help, because you're never pointing it straight down the mountain in that. You're always keeping on an edge, and you're just slightly moving towards the forward. So
they said, how do you compare snowboarding by 2 riding a 1 wheel? Oh, so comparing it to a 1 wheel. You know what a 1 wheel is? Can you slow down by leaning back? On a snowboard, if you lean back like you would on a 1 wheel, that's basically like a manual, right? On your skateboard. So you're not going to slow down that way. Really, you want to be able to swing it out, because those edges are what's going to be creating the stopping power and the friction to get you to slow down.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean,
that is a good question.
I would say don't ever lean back on skis or snowboards. Even you think you're leaning backwards towards the mountain. You're not, as much as you are flexing your heels and using your feet to pull the board up, and you're bending your knees a lot. So you aren't leaning back as much as you are pushing the board out in front of you.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to give you the control to slow down, vice versa. So I wouldn't ever actually lean back, though. If you start leaning back, you're going to fall every time.
Yeah.
So
then Miles says, what's the most dangerous thing you've seen on the mountain? Hey, Noah, again.
I like it, Miles.
Most dangerous thing we've seen on the mountain? It's a really good. There was one time I was pretty young. Now it's just story time. We'll get into snowboards again. But, you know, there was one time I was pretty young. I was probably like 7 or 8, and they had to shut down the mountain early. And because I was at like the Canyons, which is a pretty big resort, so they're funneling everyone down like 2 runs, right? And I got hit. There's like a crowd of people, and I got hit by somebody.
Right.
And my sister thought I had broke my leg because my foot had come out of my boot, kind of in a weird way. So that was kind of scary, because the storm was really nuts, and there was tons of people, and there was like panic. But I've never seen like blood or anything.
Yeah.
Not that blood is scary, but
I mean, you see all sorts of stuff on the mountain. If you want to see funny videos on the mountain, I mean, you're in YouTube.
Oh my gosh.
You can go look up some crazy stuff. I've seen, I mean, just through videos, you see like ski lifts going backwards, and jacked
That's
up
terrifying.
At high speeds, throwing people off of the lifts.
That's terrifying.
I think there's the act of skiing that on certain things that are scary. I mean, I've hit a tree before, and that wasn't the most fun.
That was terrifying.
But there's also times where I've been on a lift, and I've been like literally swaying back and forth, and just that, when you're just sitting there 20, 30 feet up in the air, and you're swaying back and forth with like no protection. That's probably the lifts are probably what have the more dangerous stuff, and then the trees, and cliffs, obviously.
So my chat kind of died. That was kind of weird. But he asked, an earthquake. He's meaning an avalanche. Have we ever seen an avalanche? Mm-hmm. I've seen like little ones, where I'd be like, hey, you don't want to get caught in that. But if I did, like, it wouldn't bury me. I haven't been caught in anything big. Have you seen anything big before?
No. I mean, I've seen the after effects, but I haven't been up in an avalanche or anything like that.
Yeah.
I will say, regardless of skiing, snowboarding, backcountry, like make sure you know your avalanche safety if you're ever going to go specifically in the backcountry. But even being at the resort, it's good to be aware of what to do if an avalanche were to occur. It does happen. Luckily, when patrols aren't on strike, we do have good safety in the resorts, right? But it is good to be aware of those. So yeah.
Sweet. My chat's still down.
Yeah. So let's move to snowboard bindings.
Okay, let's do it. So there's a lot of different brands of snowboard bindings, and it's just like ski bindings where they offer kind of different features. But unlike ski bindings, I feel like snowboarders are like married to a binding company, right? Like I knew a lot of guys at the shop that loved union bindings. They're like, if you're not getting a union binding, like, well, you're wasting your money.
Right.
When really that's not the case. That's just their preference and things that they've really enjoyed. But they would say that they really liked union bindings because they were light but still offered a lot of stiffness.
Yep.
Which seems really great, right?
So yeah, for sure. When it comes to bindings, this is like we've said, you get a lot of performance, a majority of your performance from your snowboard binding. Mm-hmm. And I do have one back here that I can sort of display for the camera.
You want me to pull this one?
Maybe you can pull it forward.
Yeah, this one's a little easier.
Yeah. We can get that up. Awesome. Okay, so talking about snowboard bindings here. We're going to get this one popped up. So if you haven't snowboarded before, very, very simple to put on snowboard bindings. I mean, basics is that you can release both buckles by pulling up on the buckle itself, pulling the strap out. It's a little ratchet system. You step in. Usually I like to put the heel on first because it will pull the boot to the back of the binding, and that will secure it in the back.
It's just got a ratchet system.
You can ratchet strap it back. I usually get my foot in completely before doing any final tuning. So I get that on, just snug it up so it keeps my heel back. Then I put the toe on. If you have, I see this a lot of times because you can adjust the straps to have different lengths, but a lot of people will just pull them out of the box and throw them on and try and make them work. Sometimes you are close to the edge of your strap specifically on the toe strap. So we call this is a little like ladder strap is what it's called, where the ratchet connects to. And what the beginners always do that I see is they try to put the toe on first. And so it's just something that you always will notice because it's really hard to get your toe strap on if it's too small and your heel isn't all the way to the back of the binding, right? So you'll see a lot of people, I mean, once you have it all set up, it doesn't really matter which one you put on first. But a lot of people will throw this guy on first just to tighten that heel back so they can get the strap on a little bit easier on the toe.
Yep. And then, one thing that's huge with snowboard bindings would be stance, right? How do I know what stance I should be in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the other part before we get into the technical aspects like stiffness and whatnot is what angle you want to set your board up as, right? Underneath the binding on this board, you have a little disc plate system here that has little 4 screws that attach the binding to the board, right? So with this, it will actually have degree markers on the plate that will tell you which degree you're going to be angled at. I'll get into setup. If you guys want a setup video, leave a message because it's a lot easier when I can move the camera up closer, show you, talk a little bit about direction and whatnot. However, basically, you'll find what angle feels most comfortable to you. So you can try a few different ones here, right? A lot of people, depending on if they're goofy or regular, which means left foot forward, right foot forward, the front foot will have a higher degree angle, usually anywhere between 9 to 15 degrees. When we're setting up a beginner, our sweet spot's usually like 9 or 12 degrees.
Yeah, usually I'd be setting up beginners at like 9.9. So they're the same on their back foot and their front foot because they're still learning how to do toe side and heel side. So
that now for the back foot, it's a little different. If you are beginning, it's nice to have it set up both ways. However, it is kind of a, what do they call that? Like a duck squat stance, where your feet are pointed in both directions.
Yeah.
So it can be a little uncomfortable. So once you know which direction you like, mess with your binding a little bit, move it forward. I like to have my back foot at like a 3 degree, so almost straight, because I am still going to have to use that heel going the opposite way. I like to have a little bit of direction. However, I'm majority carving one direction. Not like the band, but like the snowboard.
Amazing.
Yeah. So having that back foot a little more straight is just so much more comfortable, allows me a bit more control in the heel.
Yeah.
So there's some basics for you. Now, when picking a binding, there are things to consider. Like Trent said, you've got bindings like Union. Now, Union, one of the other specifics people like about them is that their hardware underneath the foot of the binding has a smaller disc plate.
Mm-hmm.
Burton also makes bindings that have discs that go into their channel boards. And so instead of a disc, it has a little channel slot to attach the hardware on the outside of the binding. This is important because it basically, we talked about this with skis, but it reduces the amount of material, like hard materials like plastics and steels, directly underneath your foot, and it allows the board to flex more, right? And that flex is what you need to get the performance out of your board.
Yep.
Right? So that's another big reason why people like Union, is that they also minimize the hardware space underneath the foot there. So they get a little more natural flex to it.
Yeah. And one thing I want to touch on with that is if you're buying new bindings and you find something that you really love, like make sure it's compatible with your board, right?
Yes.
There's a couple different patterns. Like Austin said, there's the channel. So make sure you know what your board is. Usually it'll be, what is it? Like
EST
2 by,
channel.
Oh yeah. But the most common is like what, 2 by 8? Just like the holes.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So that's one that'll be super common, and most bindings will be able to be compatible with that. But just make sure you're buying the right bindings.
Right. This is where they can get a little particular. So it's nice to go in store, or if you're buying online, to look at look at the brands and find the board that you have, compare the recommended binding. The ones to look out for, like you said, were going to be the channel boards. I don't have one here, but it literally looks like somebody cut through with a table saw and just cut like a little channel into the top part of the board, right? So they're easy to identify. Those have to use they're only Burton, and they have to use a Burton specific EST binding, right?
Yeah.
That goes to the channel. So something to keep in mind there. And then I will mention kids boards can be slightly different. So most bindings use what's called a 4x4 system, where they have 4 screws attached to the board. Kids boards can use a 3x4 system, I think is what it's called. Especially the older Burtons. Bless you.
Thank you.
And basically, you'll notice this one. It's got a diamond shape on the board. It's hard to see from there. However, it uses an older specific plate for the binding. So you have to find those plates. They interchange within your regular binding, sometimes, but not always. So I've seen a lot of people buying used. That's where that becomes an issue. So if you're buying used, I like to say at that point, if you're going to have issues with your bindings, go buy a new one,
right.
Rather than messing with old plates and trying to dig through junk piles at the ski shop.
Like ski shops have the junk pile, and let me tell you, your tech has no idea what's in there.
Yeah.
Learn to Fern said, where do you even start when you want to try/see if you like snowboarding?
Sorry. Oh, that's okay.
Where do you even start if you want to try/see if you like snowboarding?
Gotcha. Where do you even start? I mean, that's a great question. Start where everyone starts, as far as first thing you need to do. I mean, if you know where you're going to go skiing or whatnot, it's going to be, I would say, rent a board.
Yep.
Right?
I would agree.
So most beginner snowboards, or most rental snowboards, are beginner snowboards, right? So they're not going to be super aggressive. They're going to have a lot of curvature in the board to try and keep the edges from catching aggressively. And they're a very safe way to just try it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Learn to Fern, we can try snowboarding, I guess.
Do you know this person?
I don't know this person. I super know this person. But yeah, renting. I really think that night skiing is an optimal way to try it out, right?
Yeah.
Because it's usually cheaper. Usually, don't have to commit to a full day, and then it's usually not as busy.
Yes.
So night skiing and renting a board, you're looking at less than $100.
I want to hear what the next comment says.
What if my husband is an avid skier, but I want to try snowboarding?
It sounds like somebody's trying to make a statement here.
Yeah.
And I love it. There are some avid skiers that are they hate on the borders. I think I know one personally over here.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. It's a good question, though.
Yeah.
I have personal family members that snowboard. My brother and my sister-in-law, snowboarders. My brother actually started skiing. He had tried snowboarding in high school. My sister-in-law had only snowboarded. One thing I will say about snowboarding compared to skiing is sometimes it can honestly be a little more comfortable.
For sure.
Skis have a lot more maneuverability, so if you like having control, skis are the way to go.
Yeah.
If you're an OCD addict like me, you're like, okay, I can control myself as much as I want. Skis feel great. But snowboarding is a little more relaxed. The boots are comfortable. The stance is a bit more comfortable. However, there are going to be some struggles along the way, right? What I would say is if you are going, look at the resort you're going to, find the green routes. Great ones in Utah. Brighton is a great resort to start snowboarding at. I think Learn to Fern might have some connections there, I believe.
Yeah. Maybe.
Right? Maybe. So,
and the other thing too is if your husband's an avid skier, he probably just wants to get you up on the mountain, regardless of what you're on. Right?
True. Right? So first thing I would do, go get yourself a board, go rent a board, find a friend that has a board. Just make sure if you are borrowing or you're going to rent like a demo, don't get something too aggressive. I probably wouldn't recommend starting with like a full cambered board. I wouldn't be afraid of having a little bit of camber in the board. It actually is nice because it can help grab the edges a bit more. And if you understand the edge work from skiing previously or anything like that, you'll be okay. So it's not something to be like too afraid of, but generally full rockered and flat boards are a bit easier and beginner friendly.
The camber is just going to bite harder. So back to Miles's toe edge question.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of camber and you're not used to your toe edge, it's going to bite you every time.
Yeah. It's going to be a bit tougher there. Yeah. But I would say do that and then learning it. I mean, YouTube videos. We can go further into depth onto how to learn to ski and snowboard. I would love to do something.
Yeah, that'd be super fun.
Specifically snowboarding, I always say the falling leaf is like the first thing you do, right? Understand the position. Start in the house.
You can teach me how to snowboard for a video.
There we go.
There we go.
And then, so really it's just like learning the feel of the board. Start by getting yourself all set up comfortably indoors. It's where it's warm and you're not freezing up your toes off, and then get out on the mountain and start just sliding down on your heel edge. Get used to how that feels. Yeah. Right. Once you feel comfortable just going straight down on your heel edge, which is like a snowplow, right? Start going side to side a little bit and going back and forth and falling leaf your way down. That's where to start.
Sweet. All right. So we nailed those questions flawlessly, might I add. So is there anything else on bindings we need to touch on? One thing, actually, now I'm thinking about it. One thing that I remember recommending when I was selling boot boards and bindings is usually if you get like a Solomon board, getting a Solomon binding is a safe bet, right? Because they're gonna they're gonna flex similarly. They're probably designed to work together, right?
They usually look good together,
right? Exactly. Yeah. So you can't go wrong that way. But once again, you do get these, more specific binding brands like Union, where they don't make boards, right? But they do everything they can to be a really great binding for a ton of boards.
Right. So. Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, you're going to find like Burton is a safe bet. They're going to make specific colors to match their boards, and like at certain boards are going to match specific bindings, right? They are interchangeable, so you don't have to, but they might do pricing discounts or something like that if you do buy like within them. Yeah. So if you're not like married to your binding brand, try one of the boards brands because they're going to be fairly comparable. I will say, pay attention to stiffness. Usually, the more expensive your binding, the stiffer the binding is, due to the materials and the casting process of it. You can check the stiffness of a binding by also grabbing the high back and twisting it. Usually, you want to get. I like to do it from Trent's angle, from the back side of the binding. You can kind of pull and twist it side to side and see what that flex feels like. You can also do it on the base. However, you might not notice as much there, especially if the hardware's on. You can't do it on the board. It has to be like outside.
Yeah.
Right. So you can actually test that stiffness a bit. I mean, you don't really have to worry about breaking it. These things are solid.
Yeah.
Like they're designed to take your weight. So check your stiffness there. Last thing I'll mention is just being cautious of other brands and options out there. You're going to find a lot of stuff on Temu and like Amazon that I'm not a huge fan of, because they're just, a lot of those brands aren't putting in the same R&D into the technology. So you'll find simple things like the buckles that jam and get stuck on the ladders, and then they break the ladder edges. So then your binding is like useless until you replace it.
Right.
Just stuff like that. That's like because the material was too brittle, or the buckle, they didn't.
Yeah, they get too cold and then you just done.
It is the most frustrating thing when that happens, especially if you're on the mountain and you break something as stupid and simple as like a binding buckle because you skimped out and you bought something cheap.
Yeah,
right.
Just blew your whole day.
Yeah, go find sales. There's tons of stuff. Buy something used. Like I would 100% buy like a 5-6-year-old binding on KSL or Facebook Marketplace over something on Amazon that's not a name brand, or something on Temu.
Yeah.
Amazon, I mean, obviously, like Burton's probably going to sell their stuff on Amazon, so you could buy there. But just be aware of those.
Be careful.
Brands. Yeah. You'll find some like Nidaker. That is a good brand, but I do want to mention there are other different types of bindings that you might see. We talked about the step-in binding by Burton, and K2 has one as well. And they're great. I love the Burton step-on binding specifically. Amazing bindings, and so much quicker and easier. So I don't have to wait for my friends to buckle up. I can just go skiing and they can just pop right in, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
Snowboarders.
But there are some other types of step-ins, like Nidaker does the flip back on the heel.
Oh, yep.
So basically it will flip down so you can slide your foot in, flip it back up and lock it in. It actually still works pretty great. I will say they generally don't have the same response. And I find a lot of snowboarders that have a very particular, like they either love them or they hate them with that binding. But if you like them, they're great. So
the other thing I want to speak to, and then we can move on to boards and shapes and different things, is if you're going to buy a step-on binding, make sure you're buying the compatible boot with it, right? Like if you're buying a K2
size compatible,
if you're buying a K2 step-on binding, make sure you're buying the boot, because how they step in is different. The technology is different.
Yes. Yes. If you are looking, so K2, you have to buy a K2 boot with a K2 binding for the step-on system. Vice versa with Burton, because their patented locking systems are different.
Yep.
And so they can't mimic each other. I will say too, be very careful on sizing. You can find a lot of cool stuff online at good sales, but I mean, there still to this day are so many people that will, they ride a size 10, which is a large, on their snowboard binding to match their boot from Burton. They'll find like a small or a medium size binding, and they sell, and bindings come in sizes. This is general across all bindings, but specifically with the step-ons, they have to match the right size range or they won't work, because the latching points will move.
Right.
So be very cautious of that if you're buying online, to make sure you get the right size range. And they have diagrams that are color-coded to make it easy. But don't just buy the sale item because it's on sale and then realize it's a small, and you have to go try and exchange it and they won't let you
because it's a sale item.
Yep. Yeah. So I've had many people come into that issue. So yes.
Okay, well, let's move into boards, with our last 10, 15 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So let's say I'm an intermediate rider, buying my first board. What would you put me on?
Yeah.
We can move this.
Yes, let's go ahead and move this board out of the way, just so we don't have to deal with it here. Put this guy down as well. There's the strap. Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, we've talked in our previous videos about like board design as far as like camber, rocker, flat, that whole kind of setup. So if you guys have questions, leave something in the chat. We can go over it a little bit again, but I want to skip it for this point and talk a little bit about what fits what skill level,
right?
Like you said, right? So Trent mentioned if you are an intermediate rider, which we get this question a lot. We know beginner riders want to start with a flat board, or something that's like full rocker or full reverse camber with like that banana shape. So that way you're not catching your edges. When you're looking intermediate, you're looking to step up, right? So generally you want something that's going to be a little stiffer than that beginner board. You could still stay flat and do something a little bit stiffer, but I would push to move into something with a little bit of camber in it, right? If you're at an intermediate level, without much knowledge on this border, I would say they're probably riding down blues solid. They can get down greens, they're fine. They can get down blues, and they're probably trying a little bit of blacks, right? They might not be solid on the blacks just yet. I would say look for either having a nice stiff flat board or go into a cambered board. You could even do a camber like a what do they call it? A slight directional board. It's a twin directional. So that way you are able to ride both sides still, but you can start getting used to riding on one direction, having camber underneath your foot and getting a little more pop and feel to that board. That would be a great option. I mean, I think the Solomon Assassin, it would be a great board.
Yeah.
It's a bit on the stiffer side, so it kind of pushes intermediate to advanced, but I wouldn't be afraid to put someone on that.
Yeah. And, with that question too, I like how you started diving into a little more specifics. When someone came in to the shop, Austin and I actually made a game out of this with our employees. But we would make up people for our employees to sell to us, right?
Right.
So we would do it almost exactly what I just did. And you can do this with yourself, right? But one of the big questions is, where do you like to ride?
Right.
What kind of terrain is that? How many days are you going, right? Because if someone's only going 4 days, they might not want to invest $1,000 into a new setup, right?
Yeah,
but they still want to have a good time. Or if they're only going 4 days in the year, they might not want something super aggressive because then they have to relearn the aggression every time, right? So there's these different things, or like if they're going in the park or they prefer tree skiing, that you can really tailor your board or your ski to that kind of ability level and terrain level, right?
Absolutely.
So let's go back to this. I love the Assassin. I think that's a great one. But if I was, less park, more trees, rarely riding switch, what do you put me on?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when you're explaining this, Trent, as a rider, he's saying less park. Usually the first thing I hear is that really pop, and being able to ski both directions isn't a huge deal. That's usually the number ones for a park rider, is it has to be a twin board, right? Because you don't know, especially if you're jumping and spinning, you got to be able to land either way. Right. You also want to have a little of that pop response, which generally comes from camber underneath the board. Now, camber can play in other areas of the mountain as well. But I'm going to say, okay, twin board, that's full camber, straight throughout. That's not in the ballpark for Trent right there. So I can cross that one off the list, right? Now, you told me you're interested. You only really ski in one direction, or I should say snowboard. I use the verb ski to imply both. Right?
Yeah.
So you're only going one direction there. I'm going to start aiming towards a twin directional or full directional board. If you are an intermediate rider and you like going in between the trees, doing all mountain stuff, I would probably stay a little more on the twin directional side, because you're not necessarily going full powder, needing that full setback in the heel there.
Yeah.
Right? I would put you on a Burton skeleton key.
Okay.
All day long.
Yeah.
Having the directional shape, calling that out for Burton because it has a rockered tip that's going to allow your front direction to pivot nice and cleanly. If you are doing trees and stuff like that too, it's going to give you a big step up advantage there. And then having in the back of that board, it actually has camber. And that camber allows you to grip and pop in between turns a little bit better, right? But you still have a little bit of lip on the backside to be able to, switch and go the other direction if need be, or if you're in a tricky situation to get out of it. So that's why I put trend in.
I even thought of like the is it the dance hall, the Solomon dance hall would be kind of in that, or the war pig would be a little on the aggressive side.
Right? Yeah, the war pig, which is ride.
Or is it ride or nitro?
Oh, I thought the war pig was a ride, but
I think you're right.
But with that one, I believe it is a more has a lot more camber tip to toe.
Yeah.
Which is where I would just be a little bit hesitant of. But yeah.
Okay. Solid.
So
solid.
Great question though.
Yeah. And really that's what you guys can do for yourselves, right? Ask yourselves, where do you like to ski? And sometimes in the ski world or in the snowboard world, we let these outside opinions impact. But really, like, what do you like doing? I don't care what your brother likes doing. I don't care what your friend likes doing. I want to know what you like to do, right? And then let's get you a board that fits that style.
Yeah. If you have any comments, please post them below as well. I will mention one thing that I would love to see the industry start doing for snowboards is determining and explaining more about their width, from width in the tip, tail, and waist of the board. It does make a difference. We know this. I mean, skis, it's a big deal to understand, and they determine your whole turn radius based off of those dimensions. And I do know this makes a big difference on boards. If you are somebody who doesn't want to carve necessarily very aggressively, or you want some forgiveness to be able to move around a little bit quicker and not be locked into a harder carve, I favor a bit more of a straight edge.
Yeah.
Right. Something that's not going to have as much difference between the width and the tip and the waist. I've seen like Ride, when you brought up the war pigs and stuff, dude. I've seen some of those guys carve gnarly turns because they have this huge tip, this massive shovel on it. And the waist, it actually gets fairly narrow there, and they can lock in some sweet carves, and it's really fun. So if you wanted to do some groom slopes, that's another sign to look for. Instead of like a groomer ski per se, you can look for snowboards that have a little more dimension to them in that sense.
Yeah.
You'll get some good action from it.
I love that. I love that.
Yes.
So, I think this is a good spot to wrap up. We've touched on shapes of boards. We've touched on bindings. We've touched on boots. Do you have any final thoughts to leave us with?
I just love the questions we had about beginner snowboarders. I like crossing the bias between skiing and snowboarding because they are two completely different sports, and they should just be enjoyed the way that is.
Right.
It's so fun to get out there. I mean, I love getting out on a snowboard from time to time and not having to like deal with my ski boots. Mainly, that is what I love about it. Right. So I can get out on a nice, relaxing day on the mountain. I don't have to be pressured. I'm back in like a learning mindset, and it's just a great experience. So really, don't be afraid to try new things. Right. Try riding the snowboard. Try riding skis. See what you like, and switch between the two. I think we're going to see that being a more common thing in the future, is not people sticking to one specific sport. Like, I think we have a lot of people that are willing to switch between skiing and snowboarding nowadays.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
Yeah. Get yourself a good stomp pad.
Yes. Get a good stomp pad. I need to get out and ride. So learn the Fern. We can go out. We'll go rent together. We'll go try something. But thank you guys so much for hopping in and asking your snowboard questions and being here with us, and we look forward to getting together again in 2 weeks, and we'll see you between the slopes.
Yes. Have a good one, guys.